Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video we're going to be repotting these two Oncidiums that I've got in front of me. Now I went down to the garden centre on their delivery day and they had a massive delivery of Oncidiums. There were only 3 varieties available. This red variety, which I kind of picked the best of the few that were available there. This variety, which I believe looks like a Miltonedium Bartley Schwartz, maybe the original variety. I'm not 100% sure. It smells incredible though, it's very vanilla-y. So we're gonna get it out and have a bit of a better look at it. And the reason I got this red one was just because how similar to the Nelly Isla does that look? But it's not. Look at the petal and sepal shapes. The lip is almost identical to the Nelly Isla lip. Now I do actually have an Nelly Isla in bloom behind it here, so we can actually directly compare these guys. This one's still in its plastic, so we don't have to worry about any risk of contamination if there are any bugs. But yeah, just look at the shape difference. They're incredibly different. This one's much more kind of star-shaped and has wider petals and sepals, I believe. And the lip is similar, but you can see there's much more of a waterfall lip with the Nelly Isla, whereas this has a much shorter lip. So, since it's a hybrid that may potentially share one of the parents of the Nelly Isla, even if it's a bit further back in the ancestry, I just had to get it because I love red Oncidiums. So yeah, we will unpot them, take a look at the root systems and repot them. So another reason that I bought these two is because I've been wanting to try out pumice as a media, as an alternative media for Oncidium types, because apparently it's a little bit more moisture retentive than leca and doesn't suffer from the same dry top layer that can damage roots that I found with Oncidiums with leca. So I thought that these would be a perfect experiment actually for it. They were £8 each, so really not a lot of money, and they are incredibly healthy looking. So you can see they're still in the plastic, but we've got really nice plump shiny pseudo bulb on this red one. And let me know if you do have an ID or any ideas of an ID for this beautiful red Oncidium intergeneric. And what I think is the Miltonedium Bartley Schwartz, or a variation of it, has actually a new growth, which is why I picked this particular one. Even though it doesn't have the best flower display, there's a new growth just starting there, and it's actually got some new roots poking out. Don't know if you can see that there. So yeah, I really wanted to try out pumice with some Oncidium types because I've just received today an order of smaller grade pumice to what I showed you in the alternative media testing video. So yeah, let's get to unpotting these guys. There'll also be another video just showing me bringing some Oncidiums home and the process I go through for them. Although I have done this before because the local garden centre does get in some really nice Oncidium hybrids. So first things first is to remove these plastic sleeves from them. So the plastic sleeves all removed, and these are actually from Inca Orchids. They're the fragrance variety that Inca do, and I really like Inca for affordable orchid hybrids in kind of Europe. I think they operate mainly, and they do some really nice fragrant hybrids for Oncidiums. So usually I would actually soak the Oncidium first before I do the repot. However, this looks to be in a cocoa peat type of material, and I found that it's much easier to remove this type of material when it's a little bit drier because it tends to clump when it gets wet. So I've lined this bowl with actually a bin liner because I've just found that makes it a lot easier to keep everything clean. Let's get rid of that. And I really like these plastic stakes for stabilising things in inorganic self-watering semi-hydro setups. Oh, and I've just realised that we actually have another flower spike coming from this pseudo bulb here, so that is a good thing. Eventually I will be removing this stake, but for now it's going to keep the flower spike safe while I'm doing the repot, so we'll leave it on for now. And let's take a look at the root system. Ooh, plastic pot's actually quite nice, so I might keep that. Yeah, so it looks like we've got some good roots there. And this is slightly damp, so it's not going to be quite as easy to shake out as I was anticipating. Just going to hold this by the stake to stop the stake pinging up and me risking it kind of snapping the flower spike with how it's bent. I can see growing root tips here, so I'm just going to be very careful to tease out the media. And one thing that I've just found is that when you've got roots that really tightly adhere to the media, if you just kind of wiggle the media that they're stuck to, they will usually just come away. You can see how many good roots and growing root tips we've got here, so I just need to be really careful not to disturb them too much. Now, a lot of people would disagree about repotting while in flower, and in principle I do understand that because it's diverting the energy to the flower spike at that time, not to root growth. However, we can see lots of growing root tips here, so this one is in active root growth. In addition to this, I wouldn't like to leave any orchid that I bought from a garden centre or flower shop and that I didn't trust the media of in the media that it came in, because there could be all sorts in there. Usually with Oncidiums, and quite often with the Inca orchid ones I've got, you end up with snails in there. So if you leave them too long, you will just have some nicely munched root tips. In addition to that, they're in a coconut husk or cocoa peat type of material. So it isn't suited to all environments. And for me, I find it very difficult with watering this sort of material, knowing when it's actually dry. It's a very cloggy media, but it works very well for nurseries. I always say this, I don't know how the nurseries grow in the things they grow in, but it works very well for them, and you definitely can't argue that it's working very well here. So whatever works for them to get us nice healthy orchids at a reasonable price, I am quite happy with. We just need to be aware that we may need to repot when we get them. And we've actually got some new root tips emerging there from the pseudobulb, which is a good thing. I'm going to peel away some of these dried sheets. And I can see evidence of snails here because there is actually a snail there. So you can see I've just peeled the sheath away and I've seen a few munched root tips, and see if I can pick this guy up. Oh, I've lost him unfortunately, but yeah, he was just sitting where the new roots emerge. So we'll be spraying this down with hydrogen peroxide 3%, which is usually enough to get rid of any snails or snail eggs that I may miss during the repot. And now in the middle of this, we seem to have the sphagnum plug. Just in the middle here. We'll get that out, which that'll be staying quite damp in there. Try to do that as gently as possible. It's not always particularly easy when there are lots of roots in there, but okay, so I've got off as much as I can easily get off, so I'm just going to run that under the tap and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've rinsed that under the tap and got off as much of the old media as possible, so I'm happy that that's fairly clean. I'm now going to spritz this down with hydrogen peroxide 3%. Make sure that we really get in between the pseudobulbs there where we found the snail before. They like to live places like that and under sheaths. Okay, and while that is fizzing away, I'm just going to start on the next one, which is the, I believe, the Miltonedium or Oncidiopsis or whatever it is now, Bartley Schwartz. Came away nice and easily there. And again, I'm just going to grip it by those stakes. You can see you've got lots of nice growing root tips on this one, so very healthy specimens. This one just smells incredible. Like, at first I kind of thought it was a more vanilla-y scent from a distance, but as I'm getting closer to it, it does smell quite lemony, almost like the Nellie Isla. So I guess that's the Miltoniopsis parentage coming through. But it does have definitely a more sweet kind of vanilla-y undertone, I think, than the Nellie Isla does, which can be almost quite sharp, citrusy. This cocoa peat is kind of coming away in layers. Don't know if you can see. So like this is like an outer layer and then there's another inner layer inside. It's a bit more difficult than the last one. The last one was a little bit looser. When I was selecting this one, I did select the one with the new growth, and obviously you can see the roots are like the perfect size, really. This is kind of out just enough for obviously you to see them starting, but not enough hopefully for them to be damaged at all during the repot. Also means that this one should hopefully have quite a swift adaptation process. And I have noticed that when they're putting that energy into these old roots to create new root tips from them, these older roots seem to be less likely to die off in the new media setups. I suppose because they're actively growing and there's lots of energy being pumped into them, maybe they can adapt a little bit, whereas the very old roots with no growth on them don't have any of that adaptation kind of ability. Okay, so this one barely has any sphagnum plug, just a tiny, tiny plug. Okay, so that one actually came away a lot cleaner than the last one because the cocoa peat was more compacted rather than being loose, which does make it a little bit more difficult to get away, but it is easier when it's a bit drier than when it's very wet and claggy. So I'm just going to go rinse that root system off again. So I've rinsed that off at the sink, and now I'm just going to spray this root system down with hydrogen peroxide 3%. Okay, so those have all been sprayed off with hydrogen peroxide and they've been sat fizzing for a few minutes. Now we're going to get onto the repot. So what I was thinking was I would do one in a pumice and leca mix, and then I would also do one in a seramis mix, and we can compare them. Now I think we should do the Nellie Isla type, whatever it may be, this red Oncidium intergeneric, in the seramis mix because it has much finer roots, and if it does have any Miltoniopsis heritage then it might be a slightly cooler growing. Now I don't really know what it is, so it's very difficult to generalize. Yeah, it's got finer roots, so I think we're going to go for a finer mix, which would be the seramis. Because I wanted to do one of them in each, I think if any of them should go into them, it should be the one with the finer roots. And then the one with the thicker roots here, the Miltonidium or Oncidiopsis Bartley Schwartz, I will be putting into the pumice and leca mix. So really want to get these stakes out, but I really want to be able to monitor the root growth. If I have to repot soon, that's fine, but I really want to make sure that the roots are doing okay, and the best way to do that is to actually have them in a smaller pot where as soon as they start growing I'll be able to see the root tips. So I'm just going to take this stake off. I don't like this kind of circular stake, or curved stake, but there you go. Don't think I'll be reusing it, but I might keep it just in case. Okay, so that one's done. Got another tie at the top here. one done. Just do this tie here. And then we have freed the flower spike. Just take the stake away. And do the same for the next one. And it looks like it's been staked a lot more vigorously. So we've got a stake tie at the bottom here. And then we've got 3 ties at the top by the looks of things. Try and get, oh, it's too, oh, I've broken a bud. Oh, that's a shame. It was very tightly done, so it probably wouldn't have opened anyway. Okay, so they've both been freed. Okay, so I've chosen this size pot for the Miltonedium Bartley Schwartz, and I will just pop a wick into the bottom of that. We're going to put it in a self-watering system in a mixture of pumice and leca. Okay, so I've just filled the bottom half of the pot with a mixture of pumice and leca, and now I am just going to fill up the rest of the pot. Okay, so there we go. Our new Oncidium intergeneric hybrids are potted up into their experimental media. They have really great root systems. So I'm just going to talk you through the potting media that I chose. So the Bartley Schwartz here, which is incredibly fragrant, I'm getting caught up with the red Oncidium there, is potted in a leca and pumice mix. Now, I've used mainly pumice because I really want to try out the properties of pumice as an inorganic media. So we will see how this goes. I put it in a clear pot so we can monitor the root growth there, and it's going to be in a self-watering pot. I'll be keeping up to date on how moist the top layer stays because I really don't want it to dry out at all. And yeah, we will see if that works as a media combination. And the other experimental media setup we've got here is for the red Oncidium intergeneric, which looks very similar to the Nelly Isla, but isn't quite. As you can see, unfortunately, we have an upside down flower, and probably many of them are going to be upside down because of the configuration of the spike, how it was bound to that circular kind of stake. It's a really beautiful hybrid. We do have one flower which is the right way up, which is this one just behind here. Just move that. And see if any of you guys have any ideas on the ID based on this picture. It looks extremely similar to Nelly Isla, but it's just that little bit different that I believe it is a different hybrid. Considering both of my Nelly Islas do have a very different shape to this, and the lip is usually much bigger and much more of a waterfall. And we've got this one in a seramis leca mix, so hopefully they'll retain enough kind of air pockets so that the seramis won't be too suffocating with being mixed with the leca there. And this works really well for my cooler growing masdevallias and restrepias with the finer roots. So I really hope that it does work for this little guy here, and we will see. And if I can keep them like this, then that's even better. Thank you so much for watching today, and if you do have any questions, then leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more from me, give it a like or subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates, and I will see you guys later. Bye!